Why is trans discourse always centered around trans women, and never trans men? Anytime I see a discussion about trans people online, it always seems to go in the direction of trans women. What is a woman? Keep men out of women's restrooms, etc. There seems to be a specific fear of trans women that I just don't see an equivalent of towards trans men. If the issue is people identifying as something other than their sex assigned at birth, why doesn't it cut both ways? Because men are seen as a generalized threat to women and not the other way around. Generally, I think it's that trans men are just thought of as masculine or butch women. Women like that have been around forever and are not considered threatening. I wonder if it's also that men just don't care. If a guy goes into a girl's bathroom, you get all sorts of shrieks and comments. If a girl goes into a guy's bathroom, they just don't seem to care. The same people making this noise believe men and male sexuality are inherently predatory. So they believe a trans woman who to them is still a man in a woman's space is dangerous. But a trans man to them, still a woman in a man's space, is not. Trans men tend to completely become male without anyone giving them a second glance. They become and are typically masculine. Period. 2 cisgender males generally are unconcerned about trans males using male restrooms. 3 cisgender males don't consider trans males to be a threat in any sense. 4 Nobody expresses any concern about trans males molesting children or women. Looking at 2 issues that are commonly talked about. Bathrooms and changing rooms. Men generally aren't going to feel threatened by the presence of a FTM trans person. Sport. FTM trans people can't compete in men's sport at a high level, so it's a non-issue. I used to bring this up when the bathroom issue got really big. The only child I have is a son. The male predators they're all worried about have always had access to my son. Because biological men are not threatened or as uncomfortable by biological women in their spaces. Biological women don't pose nearly as much of a threat competing in male sports as men competing in women's sports. Because a cis woman is more likely to be a victim of anything generally than a cis man. Common sense tells us that a woman becoming a man is generally not a threat psychically, sexually, or in any other way. It's seen as whatever you do you and no one cares much. A man becoming a woman is seen as a potential threat sexually, physically, athletically, etc. It's also seen as more creepy and suspect. Also, a woman becoming a man is less noticeable, whereas men becoming women are easier to spot and just more obvious. Obviously, because women are more vulnerable than men are. No one is worried about trans men in sports because their performance output is starting at a level below that of men. On the other hand, trans women are starting at a level above that of women, as one example of many. Penis tends to cause more problems for vagina than vice versa. Because females are generally not a threat to men and their spaces. The 500-ranked female swimmer isn't going to switch over to the men's division and win gold. Jasmine Jasudavicius isn't going to switch over the men's division and walk through everyone. Biological women are almost never a physical threat to biological men. That's why. To play devil's advocate, I don't think any man is concerned about a trans man abusing him in the restroom. Whereas a trans woman is going to be physically stronger than most every woman. Cos biomen are inherently more of a threat to bio women than the other way around. Because having trans women in women's sports and women's prisons and women's change rooms is controversial. For the same reason homosexual discourse focuses on gay men and not on lesbians. It is not about protecting people at all. That's just an excuse. It's about the fact that male gender roles are much stricter than female gender roles. MTF transgenderism is an overt violation of these rules, as is being a gay bottom or at least acting a feat, and so there is an incentive to punish anyone who was born biological male for daring to do so. Because no biological woman is going to dominate men's sports. And if a woman comes into the male's bathroom, the males would likely just think IDC rather than worried about being sexually assaulted. Because of transmasculine erasure. All the stuff about transing our youth and mutilating children's bodies and blue hair and pronouns such are all about trans men, but it's not perceived as it because it's framed as being about teenage girls, young women's bodies, and often even other transgender people take it at face value that these people are female and don't make the connection that they're actually abusing transmasculine youth. Honestly, because the same people aren't ready to have a discussion about what it means to be a man. They're also unprepared to talk about male privilege, or how differently males are treated than women. As a whole, people aren't ready to look at how we came to these gender roles or how made up it all is. Because trans women typically still have penises, and men with penises are the threat for sexual assault. Also, the argument is that men are faster, stronger, so they have an unfair advantage in sports against women. So a trans man born a woman still would be at a huge disadvantage of competing against men. Because an AFAB entering a man's space don't really present any kind of threat or unfairness in terms of physical ability to the men. Whereas an AMAB entering an all-woman space presents more of a threat and an unfairness factor. The best way to spell it out: NFL does not have any rules preventing women from playing on professional football teams. But there aren't any women on professional football teams. Meanwhile, all female sports leagues explicitly forbid men from joining the teams because of fairness concerns. Because the problems are generally caused by trans women and not trans men. In the UK, Home Prison Service has had to segregate trans women from women in women's prisons because of the number of sexual assaults and rapes inflicted by the former on the latter. A 2015 survey found some 60 of MTF women are attracted to women. The report of the 2015 U.S. Transgender Survey. One reason is that it's easier for trans men to pass. T changes their voice, grows them beards, etc. They may be a little short and meek looking sometimes, but they generally can look like dudes. People barely know they exist. I'm pretty sure they're less common as well. Trans women, on the other hand, well, let's just say you can usually tell. I once had a best friend who was a trans woman. They told me they were transitioning and I was fine with it. But I just never felt comfortable with them entering a woman's bathroom. They had no physical features of a woman yet, nor dress or act like a woman. I have difficulty understanding because it just felt so wrong to me. How can someone who looks like a man, acts like a man, and dresses like a man enter the women's bathroom?